Chapter 18. Alice Plans a Party. It seemed to me then that everything was settled. Shadow and I had loved each other all along, and now we were in love, too. Madly in love. With the giddiness of a teenage girl getting a date with her first crush, I flashed forward through our lives together. I decided to forget that he had ever been a cat. He was a man now, in all the ways that mattered. He was my man. I ran into Amelia at the symphony one night, and of course she noticed the glow immediately. "Alice, I'm so happy for you," she said, instead of hello. "I'm happy too," I said, confused momentarily. "You found a man," Amelia said. "Someone as devoted as Shadow." My smile faded for a second. "And is he as handsome?" I nodded. "I certainly think so." "Tell me everything," she said. Well, of course, that wasn't possible. We've been seeing each other for a couple of months now. We've had our rough spots, but I think we're all past that now. "I'm so glad," she said. "Where is he? I have to meet him." How to explain? "Oh, I'm with Hannah tonight. We bought the symphony series together, and I could hardly disappoint her. Surely she'd understand that you have a lover now." In fact, Hannah knew nothing about him. "Maybe," I said. "But I've always despised women who give up all their girlfriends just because a man turns up." Amelia looked doubtful. "Well, I hope you'll correct things next year. We could have dinner before the concert. Grant and I with you and your boo." The bell rang for the end of intermission. "In the meantime, call me. You have to bring him around, and soon." I went back into the hall, and I sat in my seat through the whole second part of the program, but I never heard a note. Suddenly it was clear to me. If Shadow and I were going to be together, he had to meet the other people in my life. He had to learn all of the other things I enjoyed doing. He had to be by my side. Images of us sitting in a cozy square with Amelia and Grant or other couples of my acquaintance danced in my head. I saw him in a tuxedo at the black and white ball. We were the handsomest couple there. The only problem was how to get from here, Shadow as a secret lover, to there, Shadow as an intimate part of my wider circle of friends. If I took him by Amelia's and Sally found out, she would never forgive me. We were best friends. She was supposed to hear everything first. And if I ignored David, he would be merciless when he eventually met Shadow. And eventually would most certainly come because Shadow and I were going to live happily ever after. A dinner party seemed to be the only solution. I called Sally first. "Jack will be in New York that weekend," she said, "and the Sprout probably has a million things he needs to be driven to. I think I'll have to pass." "It's a pretty important occasion. Sam will be there." She was silent for a full minute. "Oh, Alice, he's different now. He's settled down, and we're really getting along. I think you'll like him," I said, and when the second pause grew uncomfortable, I pushed. "So will you come?" "Well, I can't miss that, I suppose." Then I checked in with Amelia. Grant was in town, and they would be delighted to come. "Will there be a special announcement?" she asked. "About what?" "Oh, Alice, an engagement, of course." It would be nice to have a new ring, I thought, but marriage requires certain formalities like birth certificates that might mean trouble. "I'm too old for that, Amelia. Look at you and Grant. If you don't need to be married, why do I?" "All right, then," she said. "Are you asking David, or should this be our secret?" "It can't be a secret forever. I plan to make this relationship last. David will have to get used to it." "Well," she said, "it will certainly be an interesting night." I was afraid of exactly that. Although David had on occasion treated me badly, I'd never stopped caring about him. He was part of the only family I had. When his longtime lover was dying of AIDS in the 90s, no one else would come. I moved in with them for the last months and helped with what was needed. And afterward, I held David together emotionally and sometimes physically, wrapping my arms around him while he shook with grief. So while David was insufferable and occasionally downright mean, he will always have a place in my life. I finally called during the day, hoping he would be out and I could speak to his answering machine. No such luck. "Alice," he said, What's happening with you? You're not still seeing that brute, I hope. I decided to ignore him as he often ignored me. I'm having a dinner party a week from Saturday to introduce my new friend to the family, Amelia and Grant, you and Sally. And you have, and you and this new friend, what's his name? Is it the brute? I was hoping he might not recognize Shadow with the mustache, so I evaded the question. Everything will be revealed in 10 days, I said, hoping to sound playful rather than uncertain. Come about 7. See you then. The next morning, I started pulling out cookbooks and thinking about a menu. Shadow was intrigued by the new things to read and stayed home to help out. In deference to his tastes, I decided on crown roast of pork as the centerpiece of the menu. If it wasn't live food, it retained some remnant of its original animal shape, and chewing on bones was one of Shadow's chief delights. The food was the only thing about the party that he looked forward to. He didn't seem particularly interested in meeting Sally or Amelia or Grant, and he was upset about the prospect of seeing David. But he saw how much the party meant to me, and he not only went along with it, he pitched in. Shadow brought my wedding china up from the basement storage room where I kept it. He cleaned the silver flatware and serving pieces and polished the crystal wine glasses. He took the damask tablecloth and napkins to the cleaner to be refreshed. Since his dress suit was gone, we never found out who took it or what they thought about finding an Armani below a bathroom window. We had to make another trip downtown, where he purchased its twin. With the mustache, he drew some curious stares, but no one mistook him for the celebrity he looked like. Shadow asked why I wasn't getting a new suit too. So we stopped a few doors down Post Street, and I got a new dress. Finally, the special evening came, as they all do. Shadow looked handsome in his new suit, and I was excited and happy as I looked forward to the evening. Amelia and Grant were the first to arrive. "I'd like you to meet Sam Wise," I said, a bit breathlessly, I suppose. "What a handsome fellow you are," Amelia said, taking one of his large hands between her two small ones. "Tell me, how did you meet my favorite daughter-in-law?" As it happened, I was also her only daughter-in-law. "We met through the ASPCA," the man in my dream said smoothly. "She used to do volunteer work there." This was one of the several questions I had anticipated and prepared answers for, rehearsing Shadow until the words sounded spontaneous. "Of course she does," Amelia said, still holding Shadow's hand. In fact, Amelia hadn't the slightest idea of what I did with my time, at least any of the time when I wasn't in her presence. "It's a pleasure to meet you," Shadow continued, with our little script. "She's told me so much about you." He paused thoughtfully. "But I think you might be maybe lovelier than she said." Amelia flushed and fluttered, as I knew she would. Grant and Shadow shook hands, and Shadow went off to fix drinks. I took a deep breath. It was going well. Then David arrived. I suppose I looked a bit flushed, all of this running up and down stairs, and David smiled as soon as he laid eyes on me. "Good Lord, you're in love," he said. For once, we agreed. He was saying hello to his mother when Shadow came up with their drinks, and his face grew stern immediately. "Did you think the mustache would fool me?" he said, his eyes burning into mine. "So you're still with the brute?" He faced Shadow. "I was hoping Alice had found someone else. I think I deserve an apology up front for our last encounter." Shadow bristled. If he'd been in his cat shape, his fur would have been standing straight out. "If anyone deserves an apology, it's Alice." I moved between them, a hand on each man's shoulder. "Please," I said, "let's forget about that first meeting, can't we? Sam, this is my ex-husband, David. David, this is my friend, Sam." Finally, David put his hand out, and with some reluctance, Shadow took it for the briefest clasp. I took Shadow by the arm and walked him over to the couch, where Amelia had taken a seat. She patted the cushion next to her, and, when he sat, she patted his knee, leaving her hand a couple inches higher. I checked to see how Grant felt about that, but he just rolled his eyes. Sally was the last to come. Hearing our steps on the stairs, I suppose, Shadow looked up. then came to join us. Sally greeted him with her coolest smile and said nothing during the introductions. When Shadow went off to fix her a martini, she turned to me. "Well, I have to say he looks quite normal," she said, "and he certainly is handsome. Still—" "All of that nonsense was a misunderstanding," I said. "He's very fond of cats, and obviously he knew that I was. He never meant to upset me, which was true enough. It was just a little charade, and I was too thick to catch on." "Speaking of cats," she said, "where's our little Shadow? Isn't he going to say hello?" It was a question I hadn't planned for. "He's in the back bedroom," I said. "With all the people and the food, I thought it might be best to tuck him away, at least until we're finished eating. Maybe then he can come out." "Are you really serious about this fellow?" David asked, walking into the conversation without the slightest concern that he might be intruding. I let my silence answer him. David shook his head. "He looks too, well, you know how he looks, Alice. Like he has a lot of options when it comes to women. Are you sure you know why he's interested in you?" "He says he loves me with his whole heart and soul." "Really?" "You're about to insult me, David. If you did, I would ask you to leave, and you haven't had your dinner." "All right," he said. "I won't point out the possible reasons for his interest. Have a good time, Alice. But don't rush into anything with him, and keep your financial papers in the safety deposit box at the bank." "I should finish cooking," I said, although the cooking had been done long ago. Still, it gave me an excuse to take a few minutes in the kitchen before I appeared with our first course. Finally, it was time to begin. "Dinner, everybody," I said, as gaily as I could. "Sam is at the far end, and I'm at the other. The rest of you can arrange yourselves as you like," I said, "as long as it's boy, girl, boy, girl." That would keep David and Shadow at least a couple of feet apart, and I would hope for the best.